Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 3 of the quarter in 401. Today we'll be covering a few things today. If you get the chance, why won't you open up Canvas and you'll see that we'll be starting right here. We'll be talking about crafting strong resumes and cover letters, talking about some specific pieces of those. We'll be guided by a PowerPoint presentation today, and then following that, I'll be showing you some external sources that you guys can use moving forward. All right, so let's get started. So resumes and position descriptions. So for the resume format, resumes are typically 1 to 2 pages long. If you are going into 2 pages, you really want to make it a strong 1.5 to a full 2 pages. If there's anything that's sort of spilling out from the 1 page, then maybe think about reformatting the first page. Otherwise, font should definitely be about 10 to 12. You don't want it to be too small where any employers, so recruiters or hiring managers, you don't want to make it difficult for them to read the information on your resume, although I'm sure there's a lot of information that you want to put on there. I will let students know that this, and we can talk about this later, but you'll have your master resume and then you're going to have your tailored resumes. So for your master resumes, those can go well beyond 2 pages. However, for your tailored resume, you're going to have 1 to 2 pages. And then, yeah, you want your font to be about 11 to 12. All right, for fonts, you can do Calibri, Times New Roman, Arial also works. You want fonts that are clear, they're clean, they're easy to read. Times New Roman definitely gives more of a classic, traditional, more serious or conservative look. Calibri can also work though. Sometimes that leans more into like the fresh, clean, and like innovative style. It really depends on what kind of industry. However, both will be fine regardless of which one that you apply to. All right, and then your margins, again, you want your resume to read cleanly and easily. I always tell students that your resume should be skimmable and then it should be readable. So in this sense, with your margins, again, I know it's always nice to tweak margins here and there just to fit as much information on 1 page as possible. However, if you do go into 2 pages, again, just work on making it the full like 1.5 pages to 2. And then when thinking about margins, really we're understanding that it is to make more room on your resume. However, you don't want it to be overwhelming. Clear breaks clear breaks between sections using white space. White space works. You could also use, of course, those horizontal bars. I'll show you an example of a resume in just a moment. So any one of these can be helpful, but really you want enough space where the eyes can sort of rest between sections that they're reading. It is not necessary to include references in this day and age. Sometimes students or professionals put in notes like references available upon request. However, that is assumed, and there are a lot of employers that use external platforms that applicants will use, and they'll often ask for references in that section. Also, there are platforms that allow for employers to ask you, or potential employers to ask you, is it okay to contact, your previous supervisor in this role? And that kind of doubles as the references piece. And then finally, staying consistent throughout. That is going to be huge. Like I said, I'll show you an example of a resume in just a moment here, but it's going to be so important. If you are bolding, your titles and then italicizing the locations, you need to do that all throughout, even if it's outside the education section, going into the professional section, going into your skills and certifications. All of these need to be consistent because, again, you want it to be skimmable, you want to be appeasing to the eye, but then also you want it to be readable and the information is easy to find. All right, so your basic content sections. So you guys are all students, so because you'll be graduating fairly soon, it is typically expected that students will have their education at the very top of their resume. As you develop more experience and go through the professional spheres, your education will actually be kind of pushed to the bottom. You'll end up having more of like a summary of qualifications or an executive summary, and then diving right into your professional experiences. However, for now, your education can definitely go at the top. And so that will include your institution, the degrees, the Bachelor of Arts for for you all. And then spelling out law, societies, and justice. Graduation date, you can of course put expected graduation date. However you do this is up to you. You could do month and then year. You could do season and then year. More often than not, people choose the month and year. And then GPA is optional. However, for certain roles, if there are, if there's any relevant coursework, like it's showing here, that would be relevant for the position, and then you want to demonstrate that you had a high GPA in that role, that works. A lot of students like to put in their honor societies invitations or nominations. That would also be perfect. Any of that essentially information that would have to do with what you achieved or earned while at the University of Washington, you're more than welcome to put that under the education section. Also Dean's List, anything having to do with the Dean's List. If there's an exceptional amount of information, you can create a whole new category for like awards and scholarships or awards and grants, and you can put like the nomination for Phi Beta Kappa there, for Dean's List and whichever. And then your experience, of course. So your experience, that can be a number of things. It really depends on what kind of experience that you have. Namely, of course, relevant work experience. That is the biggest thing. And then volunteer work, again, if it is relevant, then put it in there, related coursework, and then any leadership experience. That is going to be huge. They want to see you taking initiative in your roles or in any positions that you take on. And so showing leadership experience is going to be really pivotal for you. All right, so let's think about tailored resumes. So like I said, your resumes, you're gonna have two different types, and actually we'll start with the master, so that's a bit more broad. So your master resume, like it says here, think of it as like a living document. So this is where, if you have an active LinkedIn, for example, this is where you're gonna be putting a number of your experiences, awards, certifications, publications, all these things. You're just gonna be kind of dumping it on there. It doesn't have to be clean and perfect, but rather you want to just get the experiences on there, because when you do start getting into the job searching stage, whether it's right after graduation or once you've graduated and now you're in between jobs, start thinking about, okay, what parts of this resume would really fit well together to create a relevant tailored resume for this role that I'm pursuing, right? So going back to tailored resumes, so the most important part of a tailored resume is really doing your homework, and that's doing your homework on the website in terms of the organizations or companies that you're interested in. It's looking at the job description. I always tell students that the job description is amazing because it tells you exactly what they want, right? And so with the job description, it's going to be important, to really comb through it and think about, like, what are some verbs that they're using consistently? What's the language that they're utilizing? What are they really asking for of their applicants? Because I will say, even before you reach, the hiring managers or any of the recruiters, a lot of resumes are actually scanned through. And so if they identify a lot of keywords from their job description in your resume, then you're already kind of halfway through the door. But once you then get to a live person who's reading your resume, you want it to be readable, right? You want all of your experiences and your accomplishments to be very clear. So with that being said, identifying those verbs and making sure to use them, really using that language, look for unique connections from your experiences. For example, I have a friend of mine who has been working in early childhood development for a number of years, but now she's making the transition into healthcare. However, it is although healthcare being a different industry altogether, she wants to do pediatric healthcare, right? So of course, she's going to utilize her experiences within early childhood development, but rather thinking of it as just like looking after children and organizing activities, she starts describing her experiences as ways that she was helping to, develop their minds and help develop them emotionally, and what ways, other skills or experiences can now tailor to the healthcare industry, right? So rather, instead of thinking of a collection of your experiences being just like super random and only pigeonholing yourself into one industry or one area, really think broadly, in what ways can I talk about my experiences that would be applicable to this role? And so when you finally get to, you know, describing, you know, these specific parts of your experiences in each of your previous roles, you know, you want to use strong action verbs. You want to use, excuse me, you want to use present language. And so using active voice, thank you. Using active voice, you know, really focusing on your accomplishments, you know, outside of course, sort of, describing what you did in your role, right? You don't want your experiences to just read as another job description. You want to show that in this role, with the resources that you had, you know, what did you make of it? What did you accomplish, right? So specificity is really the name of the game here. So using, you know, numbers in terms of, I oversaw, you know, 500 undergraduate students as an academic advisor in UAA, right? Or thinking about, you know, I took over this program and I increased our social media presence by 37%. So using those kind of numbers and using that level of specificity is going to show, you know, potential employers like, okay, not only did they do what was of course asked of them in the job description, but they went above and beyond and they accomplished things while they were here. So before we move on to the next section, I will show you an example here of a resume that I think could be helpful for you all. Let's see. Thank you for your patience. There we go. Let's just start from the top, shall we? So like I said, your contact info is going to go up here. You're welcome to, you know, stack them on top of each other like is shown here. However, putting your phone number, email, and address on the same line actually would benefit you more, just because you don't, if you're trying to save as much space as possible in your resume, I am a huge fan of the vertical bars. They're just a great way to organize all the information on your resume. But let's take a further look. So you see here, the education is at the top, as we discussed earlier. We have the name of the degree. We have the names of their majors or their main study. And then we also have the college, and then we have their location. So you see here that the date, so they're staying consistent. So if they're using month and then year, it's going month and then year. And they're spelling out the months as well. If you do decide to shorten or abbreviate the months, you are welcome to do that, but just remember you're going to have to stay consistent. If you're using 3 letters, you know, to abbreviate the month, you want to do that for all of them. The tricky part is you have months like May and like July. So I tell students it doesn't hurt to just spell it out. It's not listed here, but underneath here, again, like I said, you could put information regarding, you know, honor societies that you're a part of. If you're a part of UW Student Senate, you know, feel free to put that under there, or you can put that under leadership experiences, right? So it really kind of depends how you want to work with it. And then anything having to do with your GPA or being on the dean's list, of course, you can include that as well. All right, so as we move down, so you see here actually something that's quite specific, higher education experience. Now, this is definitely the example of a tailored resume where you see that this person is clearly searching for a role that is related to what they've done in the past, which is obviously being within higher ed. So you could even do this on your resumes where for any specific industry that you're seeking, you can put the name of that industry and then experience rather than just more broadly professional experience. You could use the phrase work experience as well, but as you get older and you're working more and more, professional just kind of has a cleaner feel and look. So professional experience would replace this if you don't have an industry specific title. So as we move forward, like I said, we have consistency, right? So the names of their titles are bolded, and then you have a comma, and then the organization that they were working in or under. And then you have more broadly the institution, and then the city that they were placed in. Like I said, the consistency is going to be so helpful for hiring managers when they're like, okay, where was this located again? All right, let me find something italicized because that's going to tell me the name of the institution that they are at. And you see that it's There we go. So you see that it's quite consistent. However, you see here, there is an abbreviation here. So November, that's something that you want to look out for. Again, it's not something that would necessarily make or break your resume. However, if you put in your cover letter that you're detail oriented, but then you have something like this, then that might be something that they look out for, right? And then as we move further down, we see that they have volunteer experience. So clearly they have enough volunteer experience that they wanted to put it in a specific area. Affiliations. So like I said, if you're a part of Phi Beta Kappa, if you're a part of any other organizations, you can feel free to put them here. Skills would be wonderful. This section could probably use a few more bullet points since all the other areas are kind of spaced out well enough. You might want to do that for this section as well. Same thing here. If you're going to bullet point things underneath different sections, you might want, or one would want to stay consistent with that. And then presentations, teaching experience. So really this candidate you see has a lot of experience, and see how they went for the full 2 pages, right? They really wanted to demonstrate all of their experience, as well as sort of their multiplicity in terms of what they can do, right? They can advise, they can teach, they can give presentations, they have skills in certain software programs, they have affiliations with centers where they can obviously do some benchmarking and get information that would be important for their role. So this was a really great way to demonstrate, their expertise. But if we scroll back up really quick, you see here in the descriptions, we'll get down sort of into the nitty-gritty details. So I tell students that your first 3 bullet points, you really want those to be your main accomplishment bullet points, right? So you see here that this individual, they've been in the industry for quite some time. So you can see that it looks like they do have some details in terms of like numbers and what they've led and organized. And that's okay for you too. You can keep it fairly broad. There's no one like right way to put together a resume. However, accomplishments are really something that folks look for across the board. So you see here, advise an individual caseload of approximately 500 undergraduate students. That is specific. That shows that they're able to take on a large caseload, but then also that they can multitask, right? They can handle something this big. They're talking about what they oversaw. Let's see. Process and evaluated a portion of nearly 600 direct-to-college placement requests each cycle. That's huge. So really they're showing a lot of the skills that they have, as well as what they've developed and what they oversaw, right? They're really demonstrating some leadership skills here. This resume definitely reads like someone is applying for a director level position, a managerial level position, which often includes more oversight, and delegation. However, for any roles that you guys are also seeking at this time, that would definitely be more of like a program coordinator role. And so really showing, the level of work that you've done at the broad level, as well as talking about more specifically what you're contributing to teams is going to be really helpful for you all. All right. So it looks like we made it through the resume. So I am going to minimize this one here. And then we are going to head back to the PowerPoint. All right. So cover letters. I know cover letters, you sometimes just get like that weird feeling, like the creepy tingly feeling under your skin, because with a resume, of course, if you're applying to similar roles in if you're applying to similar roles within the same industry, like for example, higher ed, if you're applying to multiple advising roles or different sort of program coordinator roles that are within like, UW or another university in this country, then you can use the same resume. But the thing about a cover letter is that there are some things you're going to have to tweak. And again, this all really does go back to really doing your homework with the organization or company that you're interested in pursuing. So cover letters. Yes, the goal is to bridge experiences on your resume with the position that you're applying for. So you don't want to repeat any information that's on your resume. You do repeat it in a sense that you speak to, for this number of years, I was with this organization and accomplished this, but you don't want your resume to read as just like, you just listing off everything that you've done, because your resume has already done that. So really what your cover letter is doing is providing a narrative and a really strong story as to why, you know, not only are you prepared to do this role and you are a competitive candidate due to your qualifications shown on your resume, but now you're like pulling the pieces together for them, and you're showing like, this is where I've been in my experiences, this is where I am now, and this is where I see myself moving forward, and specifically with this company in this role. If you guys kind of think back to your LSJ application, there are a lot of conversations, excuse me, I'm sure that you had with myself or with Kat or with Kyla when she was here, and, you know, thinking about, you know, where were you before, right? And then what did you encounter with like your LSJ courses? You know, what have you learned? And then in what ways do you see yourself moving forward as a major in this department? And so it's really kind of using that formula where you have the past, present, future. All right, so let's get into some more details about the cover letter. Oops, excuse me. Yes, it should not be longer than 1 page. I'm sure if you ask Kat or myself, we've gone through the process of reading through resumes and cover letters, and often cover letters that go beyond 1 page can be fairly exhausting, especially when you read through hundreds of them. And so you really want to get to your point and be, you know, be succinct, be concise, but also be thorough and show that you have the competence to speak to your abilities and speak to your background without taking up too much of their space, or too much space on the paper, or too much of their time. So at the top of this cover letter, you will have the contact information of the organization or company that you're applying to, the date, any other information that would be relevant, really. Here, I'll show you now what the cover letter looks like. And I will show you that. So you see here, depending on how much you write for the broader letter, you may or may not need to put in your name as well as your number and email address again, just because, again, time is of the essence, which means space is of the essence. And so really, you could probably take this out and still be okay, but you want to include the information of your employer, right? So if we go back here to the PowerPoint, right, so you want to use Dear Search Committee, Dear Hiring Manager. You can end this greeting with a comma, or because it's a business letter, you could also get away with a colon. And so in your opening paragraph, you know, what are you applying for and why are you interested? This section is often either one sort of extended sentence, and you can use a semicolon to sort of break up the ideas, so it's not a run-on, or it's about 3 sentences, so 1 to 3. And really in this opening paragraph, kind of like what I was showing here just a moment ago, is that one, of course, you want to identify the role in the organization. So you see that they see that it's personalized, but you want to sort of in one fell swoop, in a way, speak to why you're interested in this role, what makes you competitive from the onset, and then what do they seek to gain from your employment in this role, if that makes sense. So you see how it starts here. I'm writing to apply to the Academic Services Manager position in LSJ at UW, right? Boom, right there. They know exactly what this candidate is looking for. This position offers me an exciting opportunity to continue supporting students as they navigate their undergrad experience and creating meaning within the major. Great. So now we understand, okay, they clearly are coming from outside of, you know, skills at the moment. They're coming from a philosophical and sort of a narrative-based reason as to why they're interested in this position. I'm particularly interested in LSJ because, right, shared commitment and belief in interdisciplinary education. Boom. That shows she's done her homework, right? If you look anywhere on LSJ's website, you'll see that LSJ is oh my gosh, sorry, you guys, is all about interdisciplinary education, which is huge, right? Because that's such a massive foundation of this department. It's great that she put that in the opening paragraph, right? And then and the ways in which creating connections between disciplines empower students to create change in the world, which is also a big thing. LSJ is a very sort of outside, of course, of being like this socio-legal study and having these very like higher academic terms to describe what it is also fairly like social justice oriented, and she's tapping into that right from the get-go. So based on my experience advising students at UW and her program management experience, she believes she's confident and is a great fit for this position in this department. So we have already established almost everything that the department, or excuse me, that the hiring managers would need to know from the get-go. Why you, right? So why are you interested? Why should we choose you? And then in what ways do you already understand who we are? And then where do you see yourself as a fit here in terms, again, outside of like outside of, you know, the hard skills sort of background and expertise? Where are you demonstrating yourself as like a philosophical fit? And then in what ways are you going to demonstrate that for us? And this person knocks that out right there in the first paragraph. So body paragraphs, these are, again, expanding on your qualifications. You're going to highlight things from your resume, but again, you're going to give a little bit more of a story to it, right? So go deeper into a few resume bullets. So if we go back here, we see that this individual is calling on their experience in undergraduate academic affairs. They're talking about how their approach would directly translate to this department. All of these, by the way, are available on our Canvas page. So I know I'm going through this a little bit quickly, but I just want you guys to really see the main points here. And then of course you can go through and kind of get a feel a bit more for the entire letter. So in addition to this, this applicant is excited to help construct an innovative and purposeful advising program, right? This is a managerial role. And so she's using language to show that she is a leader and that she has ideas and that she's ready to take on these new challenges. And so she's going through and offering details as to, you know, due to the large scale of my work, I had to be innovative. This is what I produced. This is what I accomplished. So really you like want to really hammer in like the accomplishments piece. Again, not in a way as if like you're a braggart, but then also not like just a litany, right, of accomplishments. You really want to describe it in a way where essentially you could feel that this is like a persuasive essay almost. Like she is really persuading the search committee that like, I have the background, I have the expertise, and I've done my homework on this organization, and I am ready to take on this role. And then you'll see, actually, let's go back here. Yes, perfect. And then the closing paragraph. So yes, you are reiterating your interest. Again, closing paragraph is kind of similar to the opening. It's going to be about 1 to 3 sentences. You're going to reiterate your interest, include a closing summary of strengths, and then of course, thank them for their consideration. There's a number of ways that you can kind of close it out. You could say like, you know, for any further information, you can of course refer to my resume. However, they have already looked at your resume, which is why now they're turning to the cover letter. So sometimes you don't have to say that, but essentially, you know, this person's like, I have the energy, passion, and personal connection to the LSJ mission. So she's already hammered out what her hard skills are in the cover letter. And now she's really going into, or not really going into, so now she's kind of making this soft pivot and saying that like, I have energy and passion and personal connection. So outside of having these skills, I can bring this all together with like these kind of soft skills that would be really helpful and would be really powerful in this space and in this position. Right, and then here she's asserting that she would be an asset as the next member of the team, right? So that level of confidence would be really helpful. And then, of course, you can close out saying thank you for considering me as a candidate, and I look forward to speaking to you further. Like I said, there's a number of ways that you can sort of say that last thank you, but that is really the format of a cover letter. You know, like I said, there's no one right way to write a resume, and there's no one right way to put together a cover letter. But the general gist is that you really want power and energy behind it. You want active voice. You really want to lay out like the who, what, when, where, and why. Of course, naturally, when you get to the interview, you'll be able to speak so much more, right, to what your experiences and expertise are. But in the cover letter, that is essentially one of your few opportunities, right, to really demonstrate your voice, and then how this voice is going to articulate what makes you a competitive candidate. All right, so we are briefly going to touch on interviews. But actually, before I get to the interview portion, since resumes and cover letters are still fresh on the mind, I wanted to bring up just a few resources that would be available to you all, in addition to, of course, what is available on Canvas. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, and then I'm going to share again, but right here on the main page. So if you check out our Canvas page here, you can go to, so if you click on, okay, so first you have this, actually we'll start with the first link. So we have the Career Center's Video Center for Resumes and Cover Letters, which you can find here. This is a really great resource for you all, just because outside of Kat and myself, of course, who are happy to look at resumes and cover letters, these folks really live and breathe this and are here to help you all with just those things, of course, with a number of others. But you see that they have upcoming events. So they have workshops where they really help you go through this. And then they have some cool DIY resources as well. So they have like PDFs, they have other PowerPoint presentations. There's videos that are done by both employees at the center, as well as linked to stories that are in LinkedIn Learning, for example, which is a license that UW has purchased and you now have access to for the next 2 years. So definitely look into that. And then the second resource is, of course, the virtual resources homepage. And so this is everything that you need to know in terms of really getting ready for the job market, outside of like finding internship and like research opportunities, but finding that job that you're going to land after graduation, or you find it in your senior year or junior year, whatever it may be. You can connect with folks and set up an appointment and things like this, or you can check out these fact pages. There's a really cool slide deck about the college level job market, which is updated weekly, which is really cool. It gives you an idea of, you know, how many jobs are being posted on Handshake, from what industries, you know, how is the job market looking here in Washington State? And then it takes a step back and expands this analysis at a countrywide level or nationwide level. So definitely look into these resources. We are all here to help you. I know COVID has made things exceptionally uncertain, and so we're here to provide any certainty and, or if not certainty, at least you know, a large degree of help, just so you guys aren't nervous about starting this search. All right, so we are going to pivot back. Actually, I'm so sorry, you guys. One more thing. So when we're thinking about resumes and cover letters, so remember towards the beginning of this presentation, I was speaking about, you know, going through, when you're thinking about your tailored resume, right, going through the job description and like finding those keywords that they're using or that keep kind of coming up again and again. Well, another way that you can get some support with that is our action verbs page. This, of course, can also be found on the Career and Internship Center's website, but as you can see, you can also find this here, right here on our Canvas page, if you click this button here, and it'll download it for you automatically. So with these verbs, you can see that there's a lot of them, but also what's nice is that they're categorized based on their industry, and as well as like the tone that you want to connote. So communication, organization, marketing, like these are things that are going to be really important for you all when you're thinking about you know, roles that are specifically within like nonprofit or social work or things like this. For folks who maybe have double majored or have a minor, excuse me, like info or something within STEM, more technical language could also be really helpful. Then again, you never know what kind of role within, right, like nonprofit and social work could ask for. And so it's always nice to have these on deck. But if you scroll back up here, leadership, those are going to be really big ones. They want to see leadership roles, or at least a leadership tone when it comes to how you're describing your experiences. Interpersonal, that is going to be really huge, right? Outside of having, you know, these strong hard skills and whatever software programs, whatever certifications that you may have, you know, showing that you can also work with people and work with them well is going to be important. And then, of course, creative and sort of the analytical and financial. There are some jobs where, again, it's not your main job, but they want to make sure that, well, you can count, but also thinking about like, in what ways do you have analytical skills that are maybe like beyond the reading and writing that you've been used to within LSJ, but also thinking about it within like a numbers and data sense, right? Every job is going to have a learning curve. So if you feel uncomfortable, using this kind of language to describe what you've done, that is okay. If you can sort of demonstrate that like there's 90% of this role that you can do very strongly, then most employers feel comfortable with there being a small learning curve within areas that you're not quite familiar with yet. All right, so now I'm finally going to make the pivot to interviews. If you give me a moment, I'm going to do a screen share switch one more time. All right, so interviews. I know interviews probably sound a little daunting, but we are going to kind of go through what are some pieces to be aware of, what to think about, and I believe that will be closing out our session for today. So with interviewing, again, it can be scary just because so many aspects of it can be multi-part. So by interviewing, so this is after you've submitted your resume and cover letter for this organization or company, they're really interested in you. And so now they reached out to you and right? What's next? So this could just be an initial email. Sometimes companies want you to do a quick background check for them, which isn't necessarily interview-ish. Sometimes they want to start off with a phone call. Phone interviews are great just because you can have your resume, cover letter, all of your sticky notes and everything right in front of you. And they can't see that quite yet. And that means you can kind of use the facial expressions and body language and kind of get out all of your sort of nervousness, if you will. Of course, with practically everything being virtual these days with COVID, more often than not, you'll probably jump from a phone interview to like a Skype or a Zoom call for your next phase. However, in person, of course, is something that we can discuss just because ideally, and fingers crossed, we won't be in this forever. And so we'll talk about some tips with in-person interviewing. But yes, video interviewing could also be an aspect. I remember there was a role that I interviewed for that started off with an email exchange. They wanted me to send some documents over to them. And then they had me pre-record some responses to questions that they had. And then I had an in-person interview. So it was a little funky, but that's like another way that you can think about how interviews can be multi-part. So when you're thinking about all these parts, though, the most important thing is preparation. So whether it's phone, Skype, or in person, the biggest thing is that you want to prepare for this kind of role, you want to prepare for the kind of questions that they could ask you. Sometimes cold Google searches can be really helpful. However, the Career and Internship Center does have resources on their website that has, I believe it's like the 30 most common interview questions that you can anticipate. Typically, interview questions are they have scenario-based ones, they have behavioral-based ones, they have ones that are sort of testing like your expertise and your background. Scenario ones are really just to see, what would this person do in this situation? Behavioral is kind of an aspect of that, but sometimes it's professionally related, and then sometimes it's sort of like workplace related. So what would you do if you see something that's not supposed to be happening in the workplace? What would be your first steps, right? You have an issue with someone in the office. What is your first step? And then, of course, like your expertise-based questions are going to be more about, tell us more about this program that you've been working with, or this website that you said that you built on your resume. Tell us a little bit more about it. Tell us about that process. They're really just kind of testing to make sure that you actually have the skills that you say you do. But the biggest thing in terms of when you first start out in this interview, whether it's on the phone or in person or via some online platform, is they're going to say, tell us about yourself and why you're interested in this role. And I think, well, a few things. One, definitely kind of calling back to that first paragraph in your cover letter. There's a lot of soul searching you're going to end up doing when you're like putting those words down on the page to finally send off. So when you're thinking about that, I typically tell students to use the present, past, future model. So for me, for example, I've been working in higher ed, right? But for a long time, well, not for a long time, but for some time before I got into this role, I was doing a lot of programmatic work and I was working with a lot of college age and high school students, right? So I can say, well, at present, when they say, tell us about yourself and your interest in the position, right? I can say, well, at present, I'm an academic advisor in the Law Societies and Justice Department. I've been in this role for a little over a year where I work with students on a one-on-one basis. I lead classes, I lead events on a quarterly basis as well as on an annual basis. In the past, I've worked with organizations, small nonprofits, government agencies where I worked with like young people and putting together educational programming. So moving forward, I'm really interested in this position because I really now want to step up and do some like broader programming that expands to students in different parts of Washington state, or maybe that expands to more governance work or something having to do with more education policy. And I think this role is going to be my next step there, right? So I've talked about where I'm at right now, what I've done in the past, and sort of how I came to this position. And then moving forward, why is this the next step for you? And then why would this be the next step for us? How are we going to benefit from you taking a step in our direction, if you will? The most important thing about this question, though, is to be honest in some ways, right? There's no one right way to answer this, but it is important that you are honest in terms of like, where are you coming from? Why are you interested in this role? But also it's going to be important to think about, in your research, what called to you when you were looking up this organization, right? Last week, we were talking about doing that value search. What values does the organization have? And how does that connect with you either on a personal level or professional level? And then how are you going to grow? And then in turn, right, you can kind of make that pivot where how are they going to benefit from having you there? Throughout your interview, so for both and this is specifically speaking to like video interviewing or for in-person interviewing, it's going to be important to stay calm and to stay professional. Unlike phone interviewing, they can see, right, your facial expressions. They can see your oh my gosh, your body movements and things like this. And so it's going to be really important to breathe. If it helps, sometimes when I get nervous, when I get excited about a topic, I'll speak quickly and I kind of forget to breathe. And so it's going to be important to like, or at least I don't want to speak for you all, but for me, it was really important to remind myself to like breathe and like take my time to like listen to questions and then like, take a breath and then respond to them. So, do some interview prep with like friends or family. We'll have an interview prep, I believe, sort of lesson at some point within this quarter. But then there's also interview prep that is offered by the Career and Internship Center. So feel free to reach out to them. But it'll be important to sort of, practice your answers, not rehearse them. So then it sounds rehearsed in the interview, but rather practice your answers in terms of, how would you sort of answer this question? What anecdotes do you have? Which of course is now the next bullet point. Using anecdotes is going to be a really, really big thing. And not just telling like broader stories in terms of like, oh yeah, I did that once, but learning how, oh, excuse me, it's my turn to breathe now. But learning how to tell stories that will communicate messages to them and also demonstrate, certain skills. It will demonstrate certain prowess in an area, right? So if they ask you a question as to like, where, tell us about a time. So that's always a sort of a behavioral or scenario question is tell us about a time when. So tell us about a time when, you had to make a hard choice, or tell us about a hard time when you had to deliver some bad news. How did you do it? Right? They really want to see, in what ways, how are you going to respond under pressure? How have you done this in the past? If you haven't done it in the past, that is okay. Tell them what you would do, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to lie about your experiences, but you do want to be honest in terms of, in what ways would you handle that situation, right? And then, of course, you want to bring questions for them. Bring questions for them is going to be huge. Again, it shows that you've done your homework, you've done your research, you Typically they'll let you know who's interviewing you ahead of time. So actually one thing, you can ask for the questions that they're going to ask you ahead of time. And you can do this politely by email, whoever's sort of leading the interview group, or if it's just going to be, or interview panel, excuse me, or if it's just one person, you can ask for the questions ahead of time. Actually, Kat did this for the interview in the department, and of course, and see how it worked out well for her. You could also, bring a notepad, and like any questions that they have, you're more than welcome to like write them down, or you can ask them to repeat it. That is okay. But yeah, write down the questions that you have for them. And this could be about the company, this could be about the role, this could be about the people who are interviewing you in that moment. Sometimes you'll have multiple interviews, so they'll ask you to come back and meet new people. But a lot of the times you'll have a panel, so sometimes it's 2 to 4 people. And so try to have questions for each one of them, because worst case scenarios that they run out of time and then you didn't get to ask all your questions, but the questions were there, right? And so in the end, of course, you want to follow up with a thank you. If it was one person, of course, just send them the one email. If it was a panel, I tend to tell students that if it's under 4 people, I would, or actually probably under 4 to 5 people, try sending each one of them an email. If it was a whole panel, like if there were like 7 or 8 people that was a part of a whole team, if there's one main person who is sort of heading the entire effort in terms of like the panel, you can send them an individual email, and then you could send like a group email to everybody else and say like, thank you so much, I appreciate your energy and your time, and there's specifics that you can bring up. And so specifically referring to those specifics, right? It'll be really important to bring up specifics from your interview. So keeping those things in mind in terms of, what did one of your interviewers say that like really piqued your interest when you asked them a question, right? Like if there's, let's say there's 4 people interviewing you and one of them is going to be your supervisor, asking your supervisor, like, what brought you to this industry, or what brought you to this role, or like, what's the toughest thing that you deal with here on a day-to-day basis, right? And then in that follow-up email, you can say like, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I was still thinking about your response to my question in terms of what is the hardest part of this role. And actually, I also find that difficult, but I also find it exciting, which is why I'm so interested in this role. I believe my X, Y, and Z skills would make me a great candidate here, and I just thank you again for your time. So see how it's like you could use, and it's just a few sentences, it's not a drawn out letter like it is with a cover letter, but there are ways that you can sort of bring those pieces in, and then they see a couple things. One, they see that obviously you're polite and you're professional and you thank people for an interview. But second, again, the attention to detail. If you put attention to detail in your resume or anywhere else on your application, and then, you're not demonstrating it in other ways, then sometimes it kind of falls away for them. But if you're already bringing up those details and you're like diligent about it, they're going to be like, okay, this person pays attention. But lastly, they see that you're a go-getter. They see that you're, really bringing in these connections in terms of like your interest, their need to hire someone, right? And then sort of like that philosophical or like narrative bond that you have with like the organization and what their aims are. All right. So actually, we have come to the end, I believe, of this PowerPoint presentation. I will say though, one last thing when it comes to video or like sort of virtual interviews is that you definitely want to learn how to balance looking at your screen versus looking directly at the camera. That's going to be a tough thing because naturally when you are watching and listening for your interviewers to ask you questions, you're going to be wanting to look at their lips, right, to make sure you capture everything. That is okay. But if you end up answering questions by looking at your screen or maybe looking at right now, right, I'm looking at myself via the little camera, but, by the little window here, but Looking straight at the camera definitely gives more of a feel that it's in person. However, if you feel it's easier for you to look at the screen or looking at the little window here in case in case their videos are lined up on the side, then feel free to. However, it would look really good to look directly at the camera. Naturally, of course, you don't have to stare at it. You can have like natural breakaways. And of course, you can like nod and make sure you're verbalizing that you're listening and that you're just taking notes when you're doing this, just because those are so many things that we take for granted in person. So if I'm looking down and taking notes during an interview, I could say, yes, I'm listening, and then like taking notes. Or that's something that you can warn them about at the very beginning of the interview, just saying like, by the way, if I look down occasionally, it just means I'm taking some notes. And they'll be like, oh, great. Okay. So you can be taking notes here and making sure you're looking up at the camera. And then lastly, because of virtual, naturally there are going to be delays. It can be your video, it can be their video. It'll just be important to get that all set up like 20, even 30 minutes ahead of the interview, making sure that your background's clear, or you can set up a virtual one like I do right now, whatever works for you. And so those are sort of the last minute pieces that have to do with interviewing virtually. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching this video. We're doing this asynchronous this week just because of tomorrow being Inauguration Day, and given everything that's happened in the last few weeks and last few months, we wanted to make this as easier on you all as possible. So please let us know if you have any questions about today's lesson. All of the links to the documents as well as the PowerPoint presentation today can be found on our on the Canvas page. And then otherwise, your homework assignment, which is due a week from today, or excuse me, it will be due a week from Tuesday, so yesterday. We want you to find a job that you are going to pretend to apply for, and we want you to put together a strong resume and cover letter for it, right? Review what we went over today, both via this video as well as through the PowerPoint presentation. Take a look at those resources that we showed you on the Career and Internship Center's website. Kat and I will be putting together a peer review list. And so you'll be exchanging this resume and cover letter with a classmate, and you'll be going over it. And so as you're going through this, sorry, the video glitched a little bit. So as you're going through the resume and cover letter, you'll see in the assignment section that there are some questions that you can go over and think about as you're reviewing. So, is their resume information relevant? Is the cover letter strong? Are they speaking to their strengths or accomplishments? Does it read more like a job description? Are their accomplishments under their education section clear? Do they go beyond 2 pages? Is it the 1 page here? Is it easy to read? And so these are questions that you'll be going through and sort of analyzing. I wouldn't take this as an opportunity to just sort of blow through people's resumes or cover letters, take some time and give them some real input. Like I said, Kat and I will be putting together the peer-to-peer list, and we'll be sharing that with you all shortly. Thank you so much for joining us in class today, and we'll see you again next week. Take care.